Hello, my name is Frederick Salmon Ujage from Edukea Tanzania. Welcome in this class to proceed with our topic, which is threats to the world after the Second World War. On the last session, we ended on the causes of the Cuban Missile Crisis. So let us proceed with the impact of the Cuban Missile Crisis. The first impact was led to the establishment of direct communication link. This was the communication hotline which was established after the installation of Cuban missiles that was aimed at to establish the direct communication between the US White House and the Moscow State House in order to see how they will solve the Cuban missiles and to make USSR to remove that missile which were targeting the influential important cities in USA. Another, it led to the removal of the USA nuclear missile from Turkey. It means that the conditions which will come up after the Cuban missiles resolution, it conditioned the USA to remove their nuclear missiles which were placed or installed in Turkey, as followed by the removal of missiles in Cuba placed by USSR under the Nikita Khrushchev. So that forced the USA or conditioned USA to remove their missiles from Turkey that were aimed to contain the spread of communism in Eastern and Central European nations. Another was Cuba remained a communist state. After Fidel Castro to pronounce and declare that Cuba was the communist state, led to the Cuba to remain as the communist state. So you can see that the Fidel Castro under his government remained or make Cuba to be the communist state after the Nikita Khrushchev, the president of USSR, to pronounce that the Cuba will be the communist state. Another effect led to John F. Kennedy gain the prestige. It means that the president of USA gains the prestige after the resolution or solving the disputes of Cuban missile without any actual confrontation. So John F. Kennedy used the diplomatic and peaceful way on solving that issue or problem that were USSR installation of missile in Cuba in 1962. Another impact led to the signing of nuclear test ban treaty in 1963. It means that the impact of Cuban missiles crisis led to the signing of treaties which prohibited those superpowers and other nations in the world to stop the testing nuclear weapons in different areas, for example in oceans and in deserts. Example, the testing which were done by USSR in Kazakhstan and Balapan, and those were the example of testing of nuclear weapons. So in 1963 that action was stopped and the treaty of nuclear test ban was signed among the three nations, which included Britain, USA and the USSR. Another was it led to the widening of Sino-Soviet spirit. It means that the spirit of the conflict between China and the USSR was widened because of the USSR to withdraw the missiles in Cuba, because China believed that this was a winning card to win the capitalist followers or capitalist countries. So that conflict, which lasted in 1960, so that led to the widening or increase of conflicts between China and the Soviet Republic. Another of the last impact was the Soviet become determined to have nuclear capability. After the Cuban Missile Crisis led to the USSR to be regarded as a nuclear capability nation in American nations and other European nations. So the Soviet Union become the nation which was feared by various nations, and were respected by the European nation that USSR is capable in nuclear weapons. So after looking the impact of Cuban Missile Crisis, let us go to the another subtopic, which is the creation of Israeli states in 1948 and other metamorphoses in Arab nations. What is the creation of Israeli state, or what is Israeli state? Is a state located in the Middle East and was formed in 1988, when UN voted for partition of Palestine in November 1947. It means that the Israeli state is located in Middle East and was formed in 1948 after the UN voted for partition of Palestine and to create the Israeli state for Jews. In 1947, to create a Jewish and Arab state. Historically, about 2,000 years ago, Roman Empire ruled the Middle East and Palestine in particular. So you can see that the Roman Empire, historically in 2,000 years ago, Palestine was ruled by Roman Empire. And Roman Empire ruled the Middle East, or particularly in Palestine. And in the 11th century, the Arabs or the Ottoman Turks was invaded the Roman Empire and took over the Middle East, particularly Palestine. And that Ottoman Turks were ruling that Middle East until 1917, when the British rule come and take power over the Middle East, or Palestine in particular. So in 1917, the British outstayed the Ottoman Turks in Palestine, and hence Palestine had been under British control until the partition of Palestine in November 1947 to create the Israeli state. So you can see that the Middle East was under the control of British rule from 1917 to 1947, when the Palestine were divided to create the Israeli states in November 1947 under the supervision of UN, when UN created the United Nations Special Community for Palestine. So let us see the factors for creation of Israeli states. Factors for creation of Israeli state. The first one was the Holocaust. The Holocaust, this was the massacring of Jews, or number of Jews, during the Second World War, which took place in 1939 up to 1945. So you can see under the Nazi Party, which was ruled by the Adolf Hitler, the dictatorship of the world in Germany, was conducted the massacring of almost 6 million people of Jews during that war. So that led to the UN to decide to create the Israeli state or independence state for Israel, for Jews, as a result of the Second World War. Another was the support from Britain and the USA. It means that the creation of Israeli state was the result of support that was provided by Britain and USA. So these nations, Britain and USA, supported the UN to create the Israeli state within the Palestine. So they created the Israeli state and they divided that Palestine on two sides, where the one side for Arabs and the other side in Israel particularly was for Jews. Another factor was the aftermath of the First World War and the Second World War. The effects of the First World War and the Second World War played a large role, or played a vital role to the creation of Israeli states, whereby the Jews were become rentless, and those European nations were chasing the Jews from their countries to return their homeland. So that led to the establishment of the Zionist movements under Theodore Herzl, who was organizing that movement from 1897, and that was influencing the Jews to tell UNO or UN to create the Israeli state within Palestine. Another factor was the role played by Theodore Herzl in 1897. This was the leader who led the Zionist movement, and that movement was started in 1897 under Theodore Herzl, who organized fellow Jews on demanding the creation of Israeli states. So you can see those Jews were influenced and supported by that leader who demanded UN to create their independence state in Israel, thus the creation of Israeli state for Jews. And the last one, the role of UN under the United Nations Special Community on Palestine. That was the United Nations branch, which was special for perpetuating the whole process of dividing Palestine into two parts, and with the aim of creating the state for Israel people or Jews in November 1947, but the creation of Israel state was completed in 1948. So these were the factors for creation of Israeli states. After that, let us see the UN or UNO's motives for dividing Palestine. The first motive or reason was the need to solve the growing conflicts in Palestine. It means that the motives of United Nations organization was to divide Palestine in order to solve the growing conflicts that was arising in Palestine, like the wars or civil wars which were proceeding between Arabs and the Jews. So that led UNO to create to divide Palestine and to create the Israeli state for Jews. For example, the Arab-Jews war was the conflicts which occurred in Palestine. Another was the 6 Days War. Another was the Yom Kippur War. These were wars which were fighting in Palestine between the Arabs and the Jews. Another motives for UN to divide Palestine was persecution of European over Jews. It means the Europeans were persecuting the Jews under harsh treatment and various and the other violation of Jews' rights. For example, the Jews were persecuted due to their origin and their religious background, so that make UN to divide Palestine in order to create the Jews states or the Israeli state for Jews, because they were persecuting by the European nations. Another was the rise of two nationalistic movements on the land. It means that within Palestine there were nationalist movements which arose during that time, whereby on one side there were Arabs who were demanding that the Palestine was their ancestors' land that were living in that land about 2,000 years ago. So this was the land which was left by their ancestors, and others on the other side was the Jews, those who were demanding and raising their voice to UN for creating the state or independent state for the Jews. So this was another motive for UN to divide Palestine. And the last one was the question of Holocaust. The Holocaust was the mass killing of Jews by the Nazi Party under Adolf Hitler between the Second World War, or during the Second World War of 1939 to 1945. So this Holocaust or mass killing of Jews by the Nazi Party, which led to the loss of deaths about 6 million Jews during the war. So those were the motives or UN motives for dividing Palestine. After looking the UN or UNO's motive for the division of Palestine in 1948, let us see the impact to the creation of Israeli states in 1948. The first impact led to the migration of many Arabs from Palestine. It means that the creation of Israeli state in 1948 led to the migration of many Palestinians or Arabs from Palestine. About 100,000 of Arabs were migrated from Palestine to nearby countries like Lebanon, Egypt, and other nations like Syria. So these were the impact of creation of Israeli state in that area. Another led to the Arabs' discontents. It means that after the creation of Israeli states in 1948 by the UN, led to the discontents among the Arabs, and that led to the eruption of various or continuous wars between the Jews and Arabs. For example, the Yom Kippur War of 1973 that involved the Arabs and the Jews, and the other was the 6 Days War of 1967 that was involved the Arabs and the Jews. So this was the indicator of Arabs' discontent due to the creation of Israeli state in 1948. Another impact led to the loss of lives and the destruction of properties. It means the creation of Israeli states led to the various eruption of wars in Palestine. For example, that led to the loss of Israeli population. About 1% of Israeli population to lose their lives during the war of Arab-Israeli of 1948 up to 1949. So you can see the large number of Israeli population led to the loss of their lives. Another, it led to the rise of terrorist attacks. It means that in Palestine, especially the Arabs were leading on the terrorist actions or attacks, whereby the various Israel or Jews and Arabs were attacking each other due to the following of the creation of Israeli states in that year. Another, it led to the explosions of joy among the Jewish community. It means in the previous time before the creation of Israeli state, the Jews were in the various persecutions which were done by the European nations. So after the creation of Israeli states, those Jews were enjoying the joyful life and peaceful life after getting their new states which created in 1948 by UN. Another effect led to the demise of the Palestinian state. So after the creation of Israeli state in 1948, the Palestinian state was collapsing because many Arabs were migrated from Palestine to other nations like Syria, Lebanon, and Egypt. That led to the collapse of that state, and Israel on the other side was growing up. And the last effect, it marked the end of British rule in 1948. It means that the British rule was marked to the end after the partition of Palestine into two parts, whereby the creation of Israeli state was formed and the Palestinian place for Arabs were remained on their end, so that the British rule lost the influence and the interest in Palestine. These were the impacts of creation of Israeli states in 1948. So there is an exercise here which comprises two questions. The first one, it is explain the UN's motives on partition of Palestine, and the second one is assess the impact of creation of Israeli states in 1948. So this is the end of our session. Thank you for watching me and listening me attentively. I welcome you to another session. Bye bye.
Purchase your tracks today.